They laughed before he even reached the desk, and in that moment, something quiet but unbreakable settled in the air like a promise no one else could hear. Ethan Cole pushed open the glass doors of Valencia Innovations at exactly 9:02 a.m., his worn boots leaving faint echoes across the polished marble floor, his jacket a little too thin for the early morning chill, his posture straight in a way that didn't ask for permission. "You're here for maintenance?" The receptionist asked without looking up, her voice clipped, practiced, dismissive. "Janitor position," Ethan replied calmly. A short laugh followed from somewhere behind the desk, another voice chiming in. "Supply closets down the hall, mops probably your size." Ethan didn't react, not with anger, not with embarrassment, just a small nod, the kind a man gives when he's heard worse and learned not to carry it. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above him, the scent of fresh polish and coffee lingering in the air, and yet something about the stillness around him felt heavier than it should have, like the room was holding its breath. On the second floor, behind a wall of tinted glass, Victoria Hayes stood motionless, her arms folded, her sharp eyes tracking every step he took, every word he didn't say. She had seen hundreds of applicants walk through those doors, men in pressed suits with perfect resumes and louder voices, men who tried to impress before they even understood the question. But this one absorbed the room without trying to change it. Down below, Ethan stepped forward as instructed, filling out a clipboard that had been slid toward him without a word, his handwriting steady, deliberate, the kind that came from years of doing things carefully because someone else depended on it. "You got experience?" Another employee asked, leaning against the counter, half curious, half amused. Ethan glanced up briefly. "Enough to get the job done." Another chuckle. "That's a low bar." Ethan returned to the form, unbothered, his silence stretching just long enough to make the joke feel smaller than it sounded. Upstairs, Victoria tilted her head slightly, something shifting behind her composed expression, something sharper than curiosity. She pressed a button on the glass panel beside her. "Bring him up," she said simply. The room below paused. The receptionist blinked. "Ma'am?" "For the janitor role." A beat of silence. Then again calm. "Precise. Bring him up." Moments later, Ethan stood inside the executive elevator, alone, the soft hum of machinery rising as the numbers climbed. 2, 3, 4, each floor carrying him further away from the laughter, though not from what it meant. When the doors opened, Victoria Hayes was already waiting, heels still, gaze steady, presence undeniable. "Ethan Cole," she said, as if she had known the name before it was written. He nodded once. "Ma'am." She studied him for a moment that felt longer than it was, then asked, without softness, without cruelty, just truth, "Why this job?" 3 words. No decoration. No trap visible. Ethan met her eyes, not challenging, not shrinking, just steady. "Because it's honest," he said. The air shifted. The hum of the building faded into something quieter. "And my daughter deserves a man who shows up for that." For a second, no one spoke. Not the assistant behind the glass. Not the guard by the door. Not even the woman who owned everything in that building. And in that silence, something changed. Victoria did not look away, not immediately, not after his answer settled into the room like something heavier than words. And for the first time that morning, the silence did not belong to discomfort, it belonged to recognition. She took a slow step closer, heels soft against the floor, her voice measured but no longer distant. "Most people say they need the job," she said. "You said it as honest." Ethan gave a small nod, his hands resting loosely at his sides, not defensive, not eager, just present. "Needing something and choosing it are not always the same," he replied. Behind the glass wall, 2 assistants exchanged a glance, unsure whether to watch or look away, as if they had stepped into a conversation they were not meant to hear. Victoria studied him again, more carefully now, as though she was reading something written beneath the surface, something no resume could capture. "You have worked before," she said, not a question, more an observation. Ethan let out a quiet breath. "Yes, ma'am." "And you left?" she pressed. A brief pause. Not hesitation, but respect for the weight of the answer. "My wife passed," he said simply. The room shifted again, softer this time, like the air itself lowered its voice. "My daughter was 3. She needed me more than anything else did. No performance. No attempt to earn sympathy. just truth, placed gently on the table and left there without expectation. Victoria's expression changed, almost imperceptibly, the sharp edge of evaluation giving way to something steadier, something closer to understanding. "And now?" she asked. Ethan's eyes did not move. "Now she is 8. She still needs me. Just in different ways." A faint sound came from the hallway, the distant hum of printers and quiet footsteps, the world continuing outside this moment, unaware that something inside it had already begun to shift. Victoria turned slightly, glancing toward the city skyline stretching beyond the glass, sunlight reflecting off steel and glass towers, then back to the man standing in front of her with nothing but honesty to offer. "Do you know where you are standing right now?" she asked. Ethan followed her gaze briefly, then returned to her. "A place where people work hard," he said. "And where people are seen for what they produce," she added, her tone sharpening just enough to reveal the truth behind it. "That is how this world runs." Ethan considered that for a moment, then gave a small, thoughtful nod. "Maybe," he said, "but that is not the only way it should." The words did not challenge her. They did not defy her authority, but they did something far more dangerous. They reminded her of something she had not heard in a long time. The assistant behind the glass shifted again, her pen hovering above a notepad she had forgotten to write on. Victoria took another step forward, now close enough to see the small details others would miss, the calluses on his hands, the careful way he held himself, the absence of desperation in a man who clearly had reasons to feel it. "If I gave you something better than this job," she said slowly, her eyes locked on his, "would you take it?" Ethan did not answer right away. The pause stretched, quiet, deliberate, like he was weighing not the offer, but the meaning behind it. Finally, he spoke. "That depends," he said, "on whether it is honest." And just like that, the balance in the room shifted again, this time not toward power, but toward something far more rare. Respect. Victoria did not answer immediately, and for a moment, the power in the room felt suspended, not in her title, not in the glass walls, or the skyline behind her, but somewhere quieter, somewhere harder to name. She turned slightly, pacing once across the floor, her heels measured, controlled, the kind of movement that usually meant she already knew the outcome of a conversation, but this time there was a pause in her rhythm, a fraction of uncertainty she did not show often. "Honest," she repeated, almost to herself, as if testing the weight of the word in a world that rarely made space for it. Then she stopped and faced him again. "Do you think this company was built on honesty?" The question came sharper now, edged with something deeper than curiosity. Ethan did not rush to answer. He glanced briefly at the city beyond the glass, then back at her. "I think it was built by people," he said. "And people choose what kind of foundation they stand on." The air tightened slightly, not hostile, not confrontational, but aware. Behind the glass, the assistant shifted again, her eyes moving between them like she was watching a balance she did not understand begin to tilt. Victoria's gaze narrowed just enough to signal interest, not offense. "You speak like someone who has been in rooms like this before," she said. Ethan gave a faint, almost distant smile. "Rooms change," he replied. "People do not always." That was the first moment her composure cracked, not visibly, not in a way anyone else would notice, but something in her eyes softened, like a door she had kept closed for years had just been touched from the outside. She stepped closer again, slower this time, studying not what he said, but how he carried it, the absence of pride, the absence of apology, just a quiet certainty that did not need to prove itself. "What did you do before?" she asked. Ethan hesitated for half a second, not out of reluctance, but out of care, like he was choosing how much of his past belonged in this moment. "I studied engineering," he said. A flicker crossed the assistant's face. Victoria did not react outwardly, but her attention sharpened. "Studied," she repeated. "Not work." Ethan nodded once. Life changed direction. No bitterness. No regret in his tone. Just acceptance shaped by time. Victoria exhaled slowly, then glanced toward the desk where his application still rested, unfinished, almost irrelevant now. "You walked in here for a janitor position," she said. "And you are telling me you had the ability to do something else entirely." Ethan met her gaze again, steady as before. "Ability does not always decide responsibility," he said. "And responsibility does not always look impressive." The room fell quiet again, but this time the silence carried weight, like something important had just been placed between them, and neither of them wanted to disturb it too quickly. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, longer than any executive interview should ever last, and then she did something no one in that building had ever seen her do. She smiled, just slightly, not the polished smile she used in boardrooms or press conferences, but something real, something almost human. "You are not what you appear to be, Mr. Cole," she said softly. Ethan shook his head gently. "I am exactly what I appear to be," he replied. "Just not what people expect." And in that single sentence, something settled in the room, something undeniable, something that could not be laughed away or dismissed, because for the first time that morning, no one was looking at a man applying for a job. They were looking at a man who did not need one to define his worth. Victoria's smile faded into something more serious, not colder, but deeper, like she had just crossed a line inside herself that she could not step back from. She turned away for a moment, walking toward the long glass wall that overlooked the city, her reflection faint against the skyline. A woman who had built everything through control, now standing in a moment she could not control at all. "Do you know what most people do when they walk into this building?" she asked, her voice quieter now, less for the room and more for the truth itself. Ethan remained where he was, his posture unchanged. "They try to become something they think you want," he said. Victoria let out a slow breath, almost a quiet laugh, but without amusement. "Exactly," she said. "They adjust, they perform, they calculate every word like it is a transaction." She turned back to him, her eyes sharper again, but not in judgment, in clarity. "And you did not do any of that." Ethan shook his head once. "I do not know how to be someone else for long," he said. A brief silence followed, but this time, it was not heavy. It was precise, like a space carved out for something important to land. Victoria stepped closer again, stopping just a few feet in front of him, close enough to see the small scar near his brow, the quiet steadiness in his breathing, the absence of urgency in a man who had nothing to prove. "What if I told you," she began slowly, "that I am not interested in hiring another person who knows how to perform?" Ethan listened, his expression unchanged, but attentive. "Then I would say that is a rare position to be in," he replied. Her lips curved slightly again, but it did not reach her eyes this time. "Rare," she echoed. "Or dangerous?" Behind the glass, the assistant finally lowered her pen, completely still now, as if even the smallest movement might interrupt whatever this had become. Victoria's voice softened, but only just enough to reveal the truth beneath it. "This company does not need another janitor," she said. "And it does not need another executive who knows how to impress me." Ethan did not move. He did not ask where this was going. He simply waited, the kind of patience that comes from years of understanding that some things reveal themselves only when they are ready. Victoria took one more step forward, now standing directly in front of him, the distance between them no longer defined by title or position, but by something far more human. "What it needs," she continued, "is someone who does not bend when the room expects it." The words hung there, clear, undeniable. Ethan met her gaze, calm as ever. "Then you should find that person," he said. It was not deflection. It was not humility performed for effect. It was truth, offered without assumption. And for the first time since he had entered the building, Victoria's composure shifted in a way no one could mistake. Not dramatically, not visibly to most, but enough. Enough for the room to feel it. Enough for the silence to change again. She held his gaze, longer now, as if measuring something she had not measured before, something that had nothing to do with skill or status or background. "I think I just did," she said quietly. And in that moment, the air in the room stilled completely, because it was no longer a conversation about a job, and everyone present, whether they understood it or not, could feel that something far more unexpected was about to be said. The words settled into the room like a quiet storm, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable, and for a moment, no one moved, not the assistant behind the glass, not the guard near the door, not even the woman who had just changed the direction of the conversation with a single sentence. Victoria held his gaze, steady, unflinching, as if she had already decided something that no one else in the room could yet understand. "You do not seem surprised," she said after a beat, her voice calm but searching. Ethan exhaled softly, his expression unchanged, his posture still grounded in that same quiet dignity. "I have learned not to assume what people mean too quickly," he replied. A faint shift crossed her face, something between intrigue and respect, as though his answer had confirmed more than she expected. She took another step closer, now within arm's reach, the distance between them no longer defined by status, but by intention. Then let me be clear, she said, her tone precise, every word placed with care. I am not offering you a job. The air tightened, the kind of tension that does not come from fear, but from anticipation. Ethan did not interrupt. He did not ask questions. He simply listened. Victoria continued, her voice softer now, but carrying more weight than before. I have spent years surrounded by people who know how to impress me, she said. People who know how to speak the right language, wear the right suit, build the right image. She paused, her eyes never leaving his. And not one of them has ever said what you said in the way you said it. Behind the glass, the assistant leaned forward slightly, her breath held without realizing it. The city beyond the window shimmered in the late morning light, cars moving far below, unaware that something far more significant than business was unfolding above them. Ethan's voice came calm, grounded. I only said what is true for me, he said. Victoria nodded slowly. Exactly, she replied. And that is what makes it rare. A brief silence followed, but it was no longer uncertain. It was focused, like the moment before a decision that cannot be undone. Victoria drew in a measured breath, then spoke again, this time without distance, without formality, just truth. What if I asked you for something far more personal than a position in this company, she said. Ethan's gaze remained steady, but there was a subtle shift now, not confusion, not hesitation, just awareness that the path beneath him had changed. That depends on what you are asking, he answered. Victoria's voice lowered, not in secrecy, but in sincerity. I am asking if you would consider building a life with someone who values exactly what you just showed in this room. The words did not rush. They did not demand. They simply existed, clear and undeniable. The assistant behind the glass froze completely, her pen slipping slightly from her fingers without sound. Ethan did not respond immediately. He looked at her, really looked, not at the title, not at the power, but at the person standing in front of him, a woman who had everything except what she was now asking for. The silence stretched, long enough for the weight of the moment to settle fully into the room. And for the first time since he walked through those doors, Ethan Cole did not answer with certainty, because some questions were not meant to be answered quickly, they were meant to be understood. The silence did not break, it deepened, stretching across the glass walls and polished floors like something sacred, something no one dared to interrupt. And in that stillness, Ethan finally lowered his gaze for the first time, not in doubt, not in fear, but in thought. He looked down at his hands, rough from years of work that no one ever applauded, then slowly back up at her, his voice calm, but carrying something heavier now. That is not a small question, he said. Victoria nodded once, her expression steady, as if she had expected nothing less. I know, she replied. That is why I asked it. Behind the glass, the assistant did not move, her eyes wide, caught between disbelief and something closer to awe, because what was happening in that room did not follow any rule she had ever been taught. Ethan took a slow breath, his shoulders rising and falling just enough to show that this moment mattered, even to someone who carried himself with such quiet control. You do not know me, he said. Not really. Victoria stepped closer, just slightly, enough to close the distance without crowding him, her voice softer now, not as a CEO, but as a person speaking truth without armor. I know what you chose not to do, she said. And that tells me more than anything you could have said. The words landed gently, but firmly, and for a moment, Ethan did not respond. He studied her, not her confidence, not her position, but the sincerity beneath it, the rare kind that could not be practiced or rehearsed. And what do you think I chose? He asked quietly. Victoria did not hesitate. You chose not to become smaller just because the room expected it, she said. You chose not to trade your dignity for approval. The air shifted again, not with tension, but with clarity, as if something unspoken had finally been named. Ethan's expression softened just slightly, not into a smile, but into recognition. That is not a choice you make once, he said. It is one you make every day. Victoria held his gaze, her own voice steady. Then I am asking if you would make it with someone else standing beside you. The simplicity of the sentence carried more weight than anything before it, because there was no performance left in it, no test, no hidden agenda, just a question that could change everything. The city outside continued to move, cars flowing through intersections, people rushing through their own lives, unaware that inside this room, time had slowed into something far more deliberate. Ethan glanced briefly toward the window, then back at her, his voice quieter now, but no less certain. "I have a daughter," he said. "Everything I choose has to be right for her." Victoria nodded immediately, without hesitation. "Of course," she said. "It should be." Another pause followed, but this one felt different, not uncertain, not heavy, but necessary, like the space required for something real to take shape. Ethan's eyes searched hers, not for answers, but for truth, and what he found there was not power, not expectation, but something far more rare. Willingness. He exhaled slowly, then spoke again. "Why me?" he asked. It was not disbelief. It was clarity. Victoria's answer came just as calm. "Because you are the first person who walked into this room and did not try to take anything from it," she said. "And I have spent years surrounded by people who only know how to take." The words settled, quiet and final, and for a moment, the room held its breath again, because the question was no longer about status or circumstance. It was about something far deeper, something that could not be measured or negotiated. And in that moment, Ethan understood that whatever answer he gave next would not just change his life, it would define it. The question lingered in the air long after she finished speaking, not because it demanded an answer, but because it deserved one, and Ethan did not move. Not right away, his eyes steady, his silence no longer just composure, but intention. He took a slow breath, the kind that comes when a man knows the next words will matter beyond the moment. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but grounded. "I am not afraid of starting over," he said. "I have done that before." Victoria listened without interrupting, her posture still, her attention absolute. "But I do not build anything on something I do not understand," he continued. The words were not rejection, not hesitation, but something more precise, a boundary shaped by experience, not doubt. Victoria nodded once, absorbing it, not resisting it. "Then ask," she said simply. The room seemed to lean into that invitation, the silence sharpening again, focused now, waiting. Ethan considered her for a moment, not her position, not her confidence, but the person standing behind both. "If this is real," he said, "then it cannot be about a moment." Victoria's expression did not change, but something in her eyes deepened. "It is not," she replied. Ethan took a step forward, not closing the distance completely, but enough to meet her on equal ground. "Then tell me what happens when this room is gone," he said. "When there are no people watching, no expectations, no titles." The question landed with weight, not as a challenge, but as truth. Victoria did not answer immediately. She turned her gaze slightly toward the window again, the reflection of both of them faint in the glass, two very different lives standing in the same frame. "Then it becomes something quieter," she said after a moment. "Something that does not need to be seen to exist." Ethan listened carefully, his expression thoughtful, measured. "And what do you think that looks like?" he asked. This time, Victoria did not hesitate. "It looks like showing up when it is inconvenient," she said. "It looks like choosing the same values when no one is rewarding you for it." Her voice softened just slightly. "It looks like what you already do." The words settled between them, and for the first time since the conversation began, something unspoken aligned. Ethan exhaled slowly, a small shift in his posture, not uncertainty, but acceptance of the weight of what was being offered. "You are asking for something real," he said. Victoria met his gaze, unwavering. "Yes," she answered. "I am." Behind the glass, the assistant finally blinked, as if waking from something she did not fully understand, because what was happening no longer felt like an interview, or even a conversation. It felt like a decision forming in real time. Ethan glanced down briefly, his hand brushing lightly against his jacket, where a small photograph rested in the inner pocket, unseen but present, a quiet reminder of the life that came before this moment. When he looked back up, his voice carried something new, not hesitation, not resistance, but responsibility. "Then I need time," he said. The words were simple, but they did not weaken the moment. They strengthened it, grounding it in something real. Victoria did not push back. She did not try to persuade or convince. She simply nodded. "Take it," she said. A brief silence followed, softer now, steadier, like the beginning of something instead of the edge of it. And as Ethan stood there, not rushing, not retreating, the room understood something it had not understood before, that the strongest answer is not always the fastest one. And sometimes, the moment that changes everything begins with the courage to pause. Time did not rush forward after that moment. It settled, stretching quietly between them as if both of them understood that something fragile had been placed on the table and neither of them wanted to disturb it too quickly. Victoria stepped back slightly, not creating distance, but giving space, the kind that respects a decision rather than pressures it. "Then take the time you need," she said again, softer now, not as a command, but as permission. Ethan nodded once, his gaze steady, but his mind clearly moving through something deeper than the room around him. "I will," he replied. The assistant behind the glass finally shifted, her breath releasing slowly as if she had been holding it far longer than she realized, but she still did not speak, because whatever this was, it did not belong to her interruption. Victoria turned toward the window again, her reflection catching in the glass beside the skyline, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to look not like a CEO, not like a woman in control, but like someone who had just asked for something real and now had to wait for the answer. "Most people would have said yes already," she said quietly, almost to herself. Ethan glanced toward her reflection, then back to her. "Most people are afraid to lose an opportunity," he said. "I am more careful about what I build my life on." The words landed gently, but with clarity, and Victoria nodded, not offended, not surprised, just understanding. "That is exactly why I asked you," she replied. A faint sound came from the hallway outside, footsteps passing, distant voices, the ordinary world continuing without knowing that inside this room, something extraordinary had already taken place. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, then reached into his jacket, pulling out a small, worn photograph, its edges softened from time. He did not hand it to her right away, just looked at it for a moment, his expression quiet, almost reflective. "Her name is Lily," he said. Victoria's eyes softened as she looked at the photograph, not reaching for it, not intruding, just acknowledging it with respect. "She is the reason I am careful," Ethan continued. "Not because I am afraid, but because she deserves something steady, something real." Victoria listened without interruption, her posture still, her attention fully present. "And if this becomes part of your life," Ethan added, finally lifting his gaze back to hers, "then it becomes part of hers too." The weight of that truth settled between them, undeniable, grounding everything that had been said in something far more important than either of them alone. Victoria took a slow breath, then nodded. "I understand that," she said, "and I would not ask you to choose anything that takes away from that." The sincerity in her voice did not waver, and for the first time, there was no trace of authority in it, only honesty. Ethan studied her for a moment longer, as if measuring not her words, but the space behind them, the consistency, the intention. Then he slipped the photograph back into his jacket, his expression returning to that same calm steadiness that had defined him from the beginning. "Then I will think about it," he said. Victoria nodded once more, accepting the answer without resistance. "That is all I am asking," she replied. The room fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, not like an ending, not like uncertainty, but like the beginning of something that had chosen patience over impulse. And as Ethan turned slightly toward the door, not rushing, not lingering, the people watching understood something they had never seen before, that sometimes the most powerful moment is not when someone says yes, but when they choose to make sure it means something before they do. The door did not close loudly behind him. It clicked softly, almost respectfully, as if even it understood that something inside that room had shifted in a way that could not be undone, and for a long moment after Ethan stepped out, no one spoke. Victoria remained where she was, standing near the glass wall, her reflection steady but her thoughts moving in ways she had not allowed in years. The assistant finally looked up from behind the glass, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, should I schedule a follow-up?" Victoria did not answer right away. She watched the elevator doors close in the distance, her eyes following the path of a man who had walked into her world without asking for anything and left it without taking anything either. "No," she said quietly. He will come back if it is right. Downstairs, Ethan stepped out into the open air, the city noise rushing back in, horns in the distance, footsteps on the sidewalk, the ordinary rhythm of life continuing as if nothing had changed, but something inside him had. He paused for a moment just outside the building, reaching into his jacket again, pulling out the small photograph of Lily, her smile frozen in a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. He looked at it longer this time, not searching for an answer, but grounding himself in the reason behind every decision he made. "What do you think, kiddo?" he murmured softly, more to the moment than expecting a reply. The wind moved gently through the street, carrying with it the faint scent of coffee and passing cars, and in that quiet pause, Ethan understood something clearly, that what had just happened was not about opportunity. It was about alignment, about whether two lives built on different paths could meet without losing what made them whole. Back upstairs, Victoria finally moved, walking slowly back toward her desk, her heels softer now, her pace less defined by control and more by thought. She picked up Ethan's unfinished application, her fingers tracing the lines of his handwriting, steady, deliberate, unpretentious. "He did not even try to impress me," she said under her breath. The assistant stepped closer, still uncertain. "Most people would have," she replied. Victoria nodded faintly. "That is why most people do not stay," she said. The room fell quiet again, but this time it was not the silence of tension, it was the silence of realization, something rare, something that did not need to be spoken to be understood. Hours passed, the building returning to its usual rhythm, meetings, calls, decisions, but something subtle had changed in the way Victoria moved through it, a quiet awareness that not everything valuable announces itself loudly. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, painting the skyline in gold and shadow, the elevator doors opened once more on the executive floor. The assistant looked up, surprised, her breath catching slightly as Ethan stepped out again, not hurried, not uncertain, just steady as before. He walked toward the office, stopping just short of the glass door, his reflection faint beside the fading light. Victoria turned before he even knocked, as if she had felt the moment arrive. Their eyes met, and this time, there was no distance left in the question. Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm, grounded, certain in a way that did not need volume. "I thought about it," he said. The room stilled once more, every sound fading into the background, every movement pausing at the edge of something important. Victoria did not speak. She simply listened. Ethan took one more breath, then continued. "If this is real, if it is built on what we both said in this room, then I am willing to try." The words landed without force, without spectacle, but with something far stronger, truth. And for the first time that day, Victoria did not step forward, did not lead, did not control the moment. She simply stood there, her eyes softening, her voice quieter than it had ever been. "Then we begin honestly," she said. And in that final silence, no one in the room needed to say anything else, because the most powerful thing had already happened, not a proposal, not an acceptance, but two people choosing dignity first and letting everything else follow.